All right, what's up, YouTube? What's up, Twitch chat as well, because they're suffering through me recording this right now. So they're going to get dragged along with the process right now. But I just finished up a Grixis Shadowed League with Fable. As constructive criticism, I think you can focus more on the sideboard choices, what to cut and why. I will do that this video just for you. So, got through with this Grixis League, and I thought there were some really sweet matches, so I wanted to record over it, get the league live on YouTube as soon as possible, which will have a link to the YouTube in Twitch chat. If you're not following that already, just consider it. But this is kind of my baby that I'm currently working on. So if you've seen the Jund videos and the Rakdos videos and stuff like that, you know that I've been super excited about Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Kroxa and those builds. And I've been wanting to incorporate it in Grixis a little bit more because, hey, Kroxa gets the game over with. Fable allows you a lot of late game punch, a lot of board stall breaking, and just a bunch of value against decks like Scam and Four Color, mURktide, Jund Saga, all that kind of stuff. So I think that there are things that Shadow has desperately been missing and want to see if I can work it into Grixis because Grixis is like the shell that everybody's super excited about. Essentially, you get the counterspell package over stuff like Tarmogoyf, Terra Sunder. You also get access to Dress Down, really, really nice. Expressive Iteration, probably one of, if not the best card advantage spell in Modern, not named the One Ring, or Teferi Time Reveler, or Wrenn and Six, or Up the Beanstalk, or anything out of that deck. So we got to play with what we have, right? But to go over the main deck a little bit, we've got 4 Unholy Heat, 4 Ragavan, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Shadow, 4 Bowmaster, 4 Expressive Iteration, and then a bunch of these random like 3 elves and 2 elves, 3 Spell Pierce because I wanted some sort of cheap counter option, 3 Dragon's Rage Channelers. These would be Lightning Bolts, but I wanted to try out Channeler, so bear with me on that one. 1 Drown in the Lock, 2 Kroxa, 1 Terminate, 3 Fable. In the sideboard, a couple Flusterstorms, 3 Dress Down, 1 Turok, 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Engineered Explosives, 1 Unlicensed Hearse, 1 Nihil Spellbomb, 1 Drown in the Lock, 1 Terminate. So basically a bunch of like one-ofs that you can bring in over some of the more expensive stuff. So like a lot of times when sideboarding, I'll end up shaving a Fable in the faster matchups or shaving a Kroxa if I expect a bunch of Grave Hate. So those one-ofs give really good options to replace those. And then things like Dress Down and Alpine Moon and EE that are lights out against some of their respective matchups might come in a little more aggressively. So let's go ahead and jump into the matches. You got to deal with Twitch chat being out down there at the side. They were hanging out while I was recording, so you know. They're here. They're staying. They're cool. Through the magic of CGI, we get to get some leagues going. So, game 1, we are on the play. Whole bunch of Mishra's Baubles and a Drown in the Lock. So just kind of hoping we find some gas. But we are a little more threat dense than some of the other Shadow variants. So I feel a little bit better. The Mishra's Bauble sees a Questing Beast on top of their library. So Misty Rainforest, Questing Beast. I'm assuming that means Rhinos. Dead and Gone kind of gives it away. But we were able to find a couple threats in our first few draws. So that's definitely a positive. Lorien revealed for a Ketria Triome makes me believe they don't have another land. Ragavan hits Flame of Venor. We could cast that, but I would rather hold up Drown in the Lock until I hit a Shadow off the Expressive Iteration, and then I'd rather get that down. I could get kind of blown out by a Fire and Ice, but even if I do, I just have like another iteration, a Drown to kind of help rebuild. They go for a value mURktide. We go for a value Unholy Heat. Let me pause right here because I know people are going to say something about it where you want to use, or you don't have to use the treasures on your opponent's turn when it's all for Ragavan. It's free to wait till your turn. Yes, unless your opponent's playing a deck with Force of Negation and they're tapped out. So keep that in mind. I use the treasure because my opponent plays a deck with Force of Negation and they're tapped out. If I go to my turn, they could force. Bad. Don't want to deal with that. So We're going to use the treasure and Unholy Heat on their turn. Another expressive iteration finds a whole mess of Kroxas, so we're going to start doing that. If our opponent does get a Rhinos this turn, it's a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world. Instead, they just get another mURktide, which is fantastic for us because that's a 3-turn clock and we have a Kroxa. And I don't know if you've done the math on it, but Kroxa usually doesn't take 3 turns to kill. Even if they have like bounce your Kroxa, attack in, I still have like attack double Kroxa for lethal, which is pretty funny. So one way or another, we're going to get it over with. All right. I promised I would talk more about sideboarding. Let's talk more about sideboarding. So against Rhinos, usually Ragavan Bowmasters are like my first round of cuts. Bowmasters especially, because unless your opponent's hard casting Lorien Revealed just left and right, they don't really have any draw effects. They could have an ice, but if they have an ice, then they're probably just like firing down your Bowmaster and your token and not icing into it. I also don't want to be just like playing out 2 1/1s in the face of my opponent having 2 4/4s. The math does not add up too spectacularly on that. Ragavan, a lot better on the play. Usually looking at cutting it a little more aggressively on the draw, because with Fire and Ice, Fury, Dead and Gone, Petty Theft, they have a lot of ways of dealing with Ragavan on the draw, like when they have 2 mana available. So it gets a lot less exciting. Bone Crusher Giant as well. So just keep that in mind. Board ends, things like engineered explosives, pretty automatic inclusions. In these kind of variants, any of the Grixis variants, any sort of counterspell you have, even if it's Mystical Dispute, that should come in. Disdainful Stroke, I would still bring in, even though you don't think about it as a card that fights over the Cascade stuff very well. It still fights over Questing Beast, mURktide, Fury, those sorts of things, and it's better than Bowmaster or Ragavan. What else? If you have Chalice of the Void, that's a great bring in. If you have extra copies of Terminate or Fatal Push, I'd usually bring those in just because, again, they're better than Bowmaster or Ragavan, even if they're not the most efficient way of dealing with Rhinos. Let's see. It's hard to focus without the visuals. Mike can make an image with the ins and outs instead of just saying before the start. I could possibly, but I don't really have like a strict 1-for-1 sideboarding policy, so it's hard to make a visual every single game for every sideboard decision. All right, so Thoughtseize, take a Shardless Agent. We see our opponent's got a bunch of ways of getting a Blood Moon effect on the battlefield between Blood Moon itself, Magus. But I have my basic Swamp. I have Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I hope they didn't draw a blue source to be able to force a negation the Fable. Turns out they did, but that's okay. I know they've got a Magus and an Otawara, I think. So they've locked themselves out of green mana, which means no Violent Outburst, no Shardless Agent until they get a basic Forest. That's pretty okay with me, because contrary to popular belief, I've got more Shadows and Gigantas and stuff like that, and those are pretty good cards. So we'll get the last card out of hand, is that Otawara. Unholy Heat the Magus. I could take another hit to try to make Shadow bigger, but honestly, I don't really care about Shadow being bigger. I just care about having Giganta and Kroxa on a clear board, which is what we get to now. And opponent scoops it up, because apparently Kroxa is a pretty good card, and they have a tough time dealing with that. On to the next one. All right, why is this chat? Let's move the chat down a little bit. All right, so this is match number 3. On the play, couple shadows, got an Unholy Heat. We got an Unholy Heat target now, so that's pretty fun. Bowmaster is a really good follow-up in case they have like a dashed Ragavan. Instead, they got a Dolphy, so we're going to get down the Bowmaster. And I believe I'm going to ping myself here. Yeah, just to make Shadow a little bit bigger. It's mostly because I only had the Blood Crypt at the time. So if I pinged them and then untapped and like shocked down to 11 and played Shadows, then it's a little bit awkward if they have an Invoked Fury, because then they could kill both my Shadows. But if my Shadows are 3/3s, then they can only kill one of them. And killing one's better than killing two. But then my opponent plays a Dolphy and attacks and kills themselves, because we have the shock land to get our Shadows up to lethal. We don't need to dash the Ragavan. We have lethal anyway, but you don't have a Ragavan in hand and the ability to dash it and not dash it. All right, so sideboarding. Let's pause and rewind for a brief second and talk sideboarding against Scam. So, Ragavan, really, really bad because, hey, you've got Bowmasters on the other side. You've got bolts and pushes and blah, 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 blah. So, Ragavan's coming out pretty aggressively. Thoughtseize, I'm more okay with Thoughtseize on the play than on the draw, because being able to Thoughtseize away a scam threat or an undying effect on the play is a lot more relevant than having those things occur while you're on the draw and then just sitting there with a dead Thoughtseize in hand. So on the draw, a little more likely to board out Thoughtseize. Drown in the Lock coming out because it does not answer turn one scammed threat very well, or like at all. Sideboarding in anything that answers turn one grief. So terminate, Unholy Heat or Bolt in the board, Fatal Push, anything like that. Nihil Spell Bomb is obviously, again, better on the play, but you gotta do what you gotta do. I brought in Unlicensed Hearse. What else? Hearse, Spell Bomb, terminates. Oh, Dress Downs. The 3 Dress Downs, because they're really, really good at late game top deck evoke elementals and when they're trying to get hard cast. So, opponent leads on a Blood Crypt, no 1-drop. Fantastic for us because we have an answer to a Dolphy or an Unlicensed Hearse on their side. I want to be as kind of as passive with my fetches as I can. I don't have a way to fetch basic Swamp with this hand. So if my opponent does go for a turn 3 Blood Moon, I'd like to try to Spell Pierce it. Now I have a way to get basic Swamp, so I'm less worried about that. But being able to Spell Pierce, I don't know, like a Fable of the Mirror Breaker could be pretty sweet. Get to take that out, untap, play our own Fable, get our basic Swamp. Feeling pretty solid here. Feeling like we got a chance, he says optimistically. Another Swamp, Bowmaster into our Fable. I kind of decide like, yo, I'm good with all these cards, so you can have the Bowmaster. But then when opponent taps off an Undying effect, you can no longer have the Bowmaster. Instead, I'll just take my Bowmaster, my army token. Shieldred is A-okay with me as we're sitting high and dry with this Terminate. So opponent's down to 2 cards. Shieldred's off the board. We've got a Fable flipping. We've got a Bowmaster, Expressive Iteration in hand. We've still got Giganta in the board. Hey, there's a Kroxa. Our God tier, sent from above Kroxa that can single-handedly wreck the Scam matchup like nobody's business. I played it in RCQ a few weeks ago, and I was playing Jund Shadow with Fables and Kroxa, and I played against Scam, I think, round 2, and my opponent game 1, like, as soon as I went to cast or escape the Kroxa, just, like, scoop the game on the spot. Sitting in, like, 17 life or something. It was just like, nope, can't beat that card. And we went to game 2, and I had like an answer to the unlicensed hearse, and then ended up playing another Kroxa on like turn 4 or 5, or like Fable ditched a Kroxa, went to escape the Kroxa, and they're just like, nope, can't beat it. Like, all right, good talk. So double Blood Moon, and we don't care because we have Fables and Kroxas and Gigantas and all the cool, fun stuff that makes Magic enjoyable. You know. All right, on to match 4, 3, might be 3. I think it's 3. 3 sounds like an okay guess. So up against Hardened Scales. Double hanger back. They've got an Ozolith. They've got a Saga and an Ink Moth. I could pass the turn and try to catch them like in activation of hanger back, but I'm really not a fan of plays like that because they allow your opponent to dictate when something occurs. So my opponent could, like, I could Bowmaster in response to the hanger back activation and gotcha on a mana. But if they choose not to use the hanger back, then I have to either like hold up that Bowmaster forever or use it and let them have the counter and not kill the hanger back. And that seems pretty bad to me. So I'll just deal with a 2/2, hopefully. He says optimistically. But they're down to no cards in hand. So that's kind of cool. I ended up passing here so that I could Bowmaster the Zabaz. Or, no, I passed so that I could Bowmaster my own Bowmaster to get Delirium online to be able to block the Thopter. I should have been playing for the upside of going to second main phase, casting Fable, and trying to flip over Delirium, which I would have with that Channeler on top. That was probably like the higher upside play. But, you know, sometimes we don't get to play for the high upside, unfortunately. But opponent ripping the Arcbound Ravager last turn, and then having the Ozolith to spread out the counters between the Zabaz and the Thopter means they've got 2 lethal attackers, which we cannot deal with both of them. We can't deal with either of them, but we can't deal with both of them for sure. All right, sideboarding against Hardened Scales. Pause. Ragavan, terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Like, you don't want to trade it with the Zabaz because they just swap the counters over to something else. It's bad in the face of Hangerback, bad in the face of Walking Ballista, bad in the face of Patchwork Automaton. Just horrible, horrible, horrible in the matchup. Bowmaster, 20% of the time, it's going to be really cool because you're going to get to snipe off something kind of relevant, like a turn 2 hanger back. They get 1 token, or a Zabaz early, maybe a Ravager with a clear board. The rest of the time, all their stuff's just going to be 2/2s, and Orcish Bowmaster is going to be atrocious. So I'm pretty okay with trimming on those. Shave on a Fable because this is like a little bit of a faster paced matchup. Then boarding in all the engineered explosives because answering Saga tokens, answering multiple like 1-drops. They're I kind of want to call them payoff cards. The Hardened Scales, Ozolith, Shadow Spear, that kind of stuff. Answering those is really nice. Dress Down is best card in the matchup for us by a mile. Answer like all the Saga tokens at once. You can counter, funny because Hardened Scales counters. Counter a creature entering the battlefield. Any of the 0/0s that enter with 1/1 counters, if you dress down before it enters, it does not enter with any counters and just immediately dies to state-based actions, and you get to draw a card. So really cool. Also stops like dying triggers on Hangerback Walker, modular triggers on Zabaz. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So absolutely, if you're playing dress down, bring it in. And I do think Hardened Scales has been on a pretty big rise recently. Like, I played a league last night with Jun and played against Hardened Scales multiple times. So if you're expecting a bunch of Hardened scales, you might want to consider extra dress downs. Alpine Moon also coming in because of that card right there, Urza Saga. That annoying land. But opponent's got his Abaz. Opponent's got Hardened scales. Not looking great. We're not in terrible shape because we do have some good interaction, but we're not looking fantastic. All right. So here we terminate in response to the Urza Saga activation because the modular trigger won't have a target. They don't have the mana to activate Ink Moth. The construct token's not on the battlefield yet, so Zabaz will just leave, no counters behind. And if you know anything about Hardened scales, not having counters is good for us. Right there, I have no idea why they didn't attack. They could have activated the Ink Moth and pumped up the construct to a 4/4 if I'd blocked. So it's kind of a free attack. But we're not going to complain because we get back Kroxa, ditch another Saga, because apparently Sagas are like candy today. And then we have a Kroxa. And I don't know if you've known anything about what I've said about Kroxa recently, but if you have a Kroxa and you can attack with Kroxa, you're probably winning the game. So, opponent down to 14. Get the hanger back out of hand. Attack with a Kroxa because I feel like they're going to block. I didn't think that they were going to block with all three guys. I was kind of, let's pause here. I was kind of hoping that they would just block with one and I would get to drown in the lock one on their turn to remove it from combat if they welding jarred it, and then like block with the channeler. The next turn get to attack with the Kroxa again and maybe find something relevant. But then they decided to triple block. So this is where knowledge of Regenerate comes in. Regenerate says if an effect would destroy, you tap it and remove it from combat. Remove it from combat. So if I go for a Drown and Lock here on a token and they decide to welding jar it, I get to remove it from combat, deal with the other two because they lost an artifact in welding jar. They're down to 3/3s, and I get to wipe out two of these constructs at the cost of Kroxa just going to the graveyard, which that's kind of a place Kroxa's okay with being as long as I'm able to find another spell or two in the meantime. But we're not terribly afraid of just two construct tokens. Any removal spell / dress down deals with them. You know. So we get the... I was waiting for them to strap up the Shadow Spear on one of them and make them use up their mana, but they didn't. So we'll just dress down anyway, kill off all the tokens. We throw Shadow into the yard because I would rather escape the Kroxa next turn. And since the dress down will be going to the yard at the end of turn, I get to do that. But then we happen to top deck an Unholy Heat to kill off an Automaton, get back Kroxa, opponent scoops it up, and we get to go on to round number 4, I think. No, this is game 3 of round number 3. That's right, it's 1-1. Math's tough. Either way. Pretty slow hand. I was kind of hoping that I would just find some amount of interaction, or they would play out a dinky 1/1 and I'd get to Bowmaster down. Like maybe they play out a hanger back on turn 2. But instead they have a Patchwork Automaton. So I can't target it with Bowmaster because Ward is a thing. But I'm not going to go to my turn having not used any of my mana. So we'll just flash in the Bowmaster anyway. And then let's get ourselves a Fable of the Mirror Breaker down. Because this isn't a mirror, but I would like to break it. We get a whole bunch of bodies. So, like, they could go get another Shadow Spear and strap up something, get in a decent attack. But instead they go for this Haywire Might on the Fable line, which I'm A-okay with, because, cool, you got my Fable. As I'm sitting here with expressive iterations galore. We don't have our life low enough to get down Shadow, so we're just going to make Treasure an attack. I was kind of feeling like maybe they didn't block because I had the EE, but they blocked. I was going to EE anyway. Now I kind of end up with a free mana that looks like I could be bluffing something, even though I'm not bluffing something. Got Kroxa to start working on the hand. I really want to try my best to not tap off of Drown in the Loch for the rest of this game. So opponent's a little mana screwed. They've got a lot of things that they can do for 4 mana, like Hangerback for 2, Ballista for 2, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I don't want that resolving, so we're going to, cut that one out. Soak up a little damage with Shadow. But there's just like a bunch of really good top decks that I don't want hitting the battlefield. So having access to Drown in these situations is super, super nice. Having access to Dress Down is also super, super nice when your opponent goes for something that enters as a 0/0 with counters on it. Because, sometimes you don't want it to enter at all. Or I guess technically it enters and dies, but you get the idea. Shadow Spear on an Automaton. If they wanted to attack, we would just block it. Since they don't want to attack, we're going to just terminate it. So, boop. And back to the power of Kroxa. Kroxa coming in, getting to just escape, get the last card out of hand, put a 6/6 on the board. I could attack with a Shadow, but I don't want the Kroxa just dying to the Automaton if they strap it up and attack. So instead, we're gonna keep the Shadow around. We're gonna hang out a bit. We're gonna, I don't know, maybe Unholy Heat as a Boz. I'm really surprised that they tapped off of the Ink Moth there to strap up the Morgul Knife or the Shadow Spear, whatever we're calling it. I feel like you'd rather block with that than a Construct. But either way, terminate the Automaton off the top, and we're cruising. We're cruising. Cruising to match number 4. Match number 4 with all the Ragavans. On the draw, no companion, breeding pool, red or blue fetch steam vents. It's like automatic mURktide assumption. Automatic. So since I've got all these Ragavans, I want to lead on the Ragavan first because it's got the highest upside. If they kill it, cool, I've got another Ragavan. If they don't kill it, then cool, I've got a Ragavan. But I get to go to turn 2, start off on the Thoughtseize, go with another Ragavan, and it's just like, hey, deal with these. I could dash the Ragavan, but if they have a counter spell or a removal spell, then it just takes up my entire turn. But just Thoughtseize first and hardcast the Ragavan means if they have a removal spell, then I'm not losing my entire turn. I still get to make them do something about the Thoughtseize. And opponent showing they don't have an answer unless they, flash in a Subtlety. But we did see off of the Bauble earlier that one of their unknown cards is a Force of Negation. So if I can afford to play around that a little bit, then that seems like a good idea. So Force of Negation, one unknown card is clearly not a mURktide, or they probably would have played it out. The unknown is a counter spell, so they nab my Shadow, but I get Giganta, so it's kind of a trade-off. I was really trying to make my board not like weak to Fury, or as not weak to Fury as I could make it, because they showed Subtlety in the main, so it wouldn't be like unreasonable to think they might have Fury. And so I didn't want to play out Shadow as a 4/4. I didn't want to shock in until I knew Shadow was on the battlefield. And yeah, that's about it for this game. We got a whole bunch of little cheap duders down, and we can attack around any big thing they can throw out. So let's go to game number 2. talking sideboarding. Okay. Sideboarding against mURktide. Ragavan, pretty awful, especially on the draw. A lot better on the play, but on the draw, you've got a combination of your opponent's Ragavans, Dragon's Rage Channelers, Ledger Shredders in the way, plus Bolt, Unholy Heat, just Stern Scolding, just a whole mess of things that stop Ragavan from being relevant. So I'd rather trim it for some more impactful cards. Thoughtseize, I kind of talked about it a little bit before we started recording the league. I've got like an inverse relationship between Thoughtseize and spot removal in the matchup. So if I have spot removal spells, I'm bringing in out of the sideboard, like Terminates, especially ways to answer mURktide. Terminate, what's it called? Shieldred's Edict, stuff like that. The more of those I'm bringing in, the more I want to take Thoughtseize out. If I don't have those heavy removal spells on the board, then I'm more likely to leave more Thoughtseizes in because mURktide is like the key piece in the matchup on either side. It's the hardest thing to deal with. It's the biggest hitter, biggest problem, so you have to have answers to mURktide. Bringing out Drown in the Loch because it is horrible against mURktide itself. And then boarding in any extra Terminates, Nihil, Spellbomb, Unlicensed Hearse. I boarded in one Engineered Explosives. I usually don't like having a bunch of them, but the first one's pretty good. Boarded in a couple Dress Downs because they help with the pitch elementals. They help with making mURktide come in smaller. Make things lose flying. Actually very relevant. And then what else did I board in? Hearse, Nihil, Spellbomb, Extra Terminate, EE, Dress Downs, and something else that I can't remember, but I will get back to it as soon as I see it. Oh, Turok, bring in, because mid-range mirror, if you get to like that turn 4 point and you have the ability to freely kick a Turok, it can definitely swing the card advantage war your way. So we got Spell Pierce on top. Really good if they have like an Unlicensed Hearse here or maybe a Blood Moon on turn 3. So I'll be a little passive with it. Holding up this fetch in case I want to get basic Swamp. Like I can fetch and shock a Watery Grave to Spell Pierce if they go for a Blood Moon. I can fetch up a tapped land if they go for nothing since I have more fetches to get black sources. Just what we're doing here. And there's Turok, so we know we're going to have access to that next turn if we get a clear opening. I don't want to spend 4 mana on something that doesn't get guaranteed value. And Turok straight up for a counter spell is trading down because I'm spending 4 mana and getting 2 mana of return. 2 mana being their counter spell. So a little more conscientious of that. I could also go for escaping the Kroxa here, but I really think that my opponent has a counter spell, so I'm being like a little conscientious of that, trying to make plays that minimize the effect of counter spell. Now they're down to 1 card in hand. I'll go for the Terminate because if it is a counter spell and they use it on the Terminate, then they might not be able to cast something off of the Expressive iteration. And then here, because they've gone down to 1 mana available, we'll take the opportunity to kick the Turok. Because it would have to be Stern Scolding is the only thing that they could have that stops it. And if they kill the Turok in response to the trigger, then I get all 3 cards out of their hand. That would also be pretty nice. 1 card in hand, hit them down to 10. If you do up the math, 2 pings off Bowmaster puts them to 8. And then Turok, 2 1/1 Bowmasters, and a 2/2 Army token is exactly 10 total. So we've got lethal if they got nothing. I do have a Petty Theft. Pretty solid, I guess. We could escape Kroxa, but then we're dead in the air. So we would have to kill something. Luckily, like, they'd have to flash in the Brazen Bar, in which case we get to terminate something anyway. So the Dragon's Rage Channeler is a very, very solid blocker. Very, very good draw. Unless they had a bolt, it might not have mattered. But we'll never know because we're on to match number 5. Secluded Courtyard, Humans, Aether Vial. Shit. Talk about worst start you could possibly see in a trophy match in a League of Modern for your Death Shadow deck. And then having the second human off the vial is a nightmare. And it being something that doesn't die to Unholy Heat. Like, I would love to kill off the second thing, attack it with Ragavan, and make them trade off the Thalia's Lieutenant. But the fact that it's a 1-2 that gets a counter, so I can't even, like, kill it off and then trade off another threat is absolutely brutal. And then Anointed Peacekeeper, which we saw off the bauble. I learned so many things about this Magic card that I didn't know before. For example, when you name something with Anointed Peacekeeper, you can't cast the name card unless you pay 2 more mana. Sure. Did you also know you can't activate the activated ability of that card unless you pay 2 more? Because I didn't, and I found that out, and that was interesting. I hated every moment of it, but it was interesting. So, absolutely steamrolled that game. Game 2, boarding out some Thoughtseizes and Ragavans. Thoughtseize mainly because they're really terrible top deck late. Board out a couple Ragavans because I definitely don't want to see multiples of them. They get stonewalled really, really quickly. But seeing one on turn 1 can be good as long as you never see another one and you're able to kind of get a tempo advantage. So I'm okay with a couple. Spell Piercers are coming out. Like, anybody who says on the play, fight over Aether Vial, don't listen to them. Shun them. Send their contact information to the bottom of your friends list. Whatever you got to do. Just don't go down that route. Boarding in Dress Downs because it stops all the ETB abilities on things like Reflector Mage. What's it called? Thalia's Lieutenant. Stops Ward from things like Coppercoat Vanguard. Board in any extra removal. In this case, Terminate, Drown in the Lock. I think I said EE. Pray to whatever god you believe in. If you don't believe in a god, find one. Pray to him, because that's about the only way you're beating humans. This is arguably one of, or what I would say is probably like top 3 worst matchups for shadow archetypes all time. Humans is just a nightmare and a half, and I hate every minute of it. And I'm so glad that the deck fell off the face of the earth, even though it clearly did not fall off the face of the earth. So, no Delirium. I could attack in. Oh, have you seen this card before? Talk about some crap. So, this Jirina card, I don't know what to call it. A white and a black for 2/2. Cool. When it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. Just nuke the entire yard. 2 mana, ETB, nuke the yard. And then it's got another activated ability that says sacrifice it. All of your humans get hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. Bruh. What? What? Why is all this text on a Magic card? Like, I thought about attacking, and I thought about flashing in Bowmaster on a blocker, but I was kind of afraid of a 2 toughness guy, and I didn't want to trade off my Channeler, so, you know, whatever. Here's a Reflector Mage. Also, I found out that Anointed Peacekeeper doesn't make an ETB ability. I should have red as Anointed Peacekeeper enters the battlefield. So you can't respond to it with like fetch shock dress down or fetch shock bowmaster or whatever. No. It's just there. It's just naming stuff. Oh, look, it's more Reflector Mages. The bane of my modern existence, Reflector Mage. Oh, and a Manus Rider. That's actually in our chat, is you cannot top deck a Manus Rider. It is actually illegal. It's there. You can check it. You can read the minutes. At least it's not bouncing Gurmag Angler. Truth. Truth. Still feels god awful. So I eat on 3, hoping that like I could dodge a Lord and maybe get one more turn. You know, they got a bunch of 3 drops out. Unfortunately, they got another Anointed Peacekeeper, which this is where I found out, oh, this name's activated abilities too. Because I was like, why did they name Engineered Explosives? It's on the battlefield already. Oh, because they just get to kill it. My one out there was drawing into basic Swamp to play the other Shadow. So that's why I didn't just like scoop immediately. I know I'm dead on board, so the 3rd Reflector Mage is just adding insult to injury. Not cool, bro. Not cool. And that's it. So let's talk about some of the card decisions. Fable and Kroxa were phenomenal the entire league. Absolutely love them. Don't plan on ditching them anytime soon. Channeler was I thought there were a few spots that I would have loved to have had just like a blocker and couldn't because I had to attack with Channeler. And there were a few spots that I would have much rather Channeler been some sort of interactive spell. So still very low on Channeler personally. Iteration was great. Bowmaster was fine. Drown was great. Pierce was fine. Kind of like this roller coaster of greats and fines. Dress Down was phenomenal post board. Turok was fine. Flusterstorm. We saw Rhinos, but we didn't see Flusterstorm. We also saw mURktide, but didn't draw Fluster in that either. Alpine Moon. We did see two saga matches, one saga match, one saga match. What did we see? We saw mURktide, Scam, Rhinos, Hardened, Scales, Humans. So one saga match. So if you're not seeing a bunch of Tron and Amulet and Saga, then Alpine Moon's a little less exciting, but it's not a huge like use of sideboard spots, so I wouldn't be completely against keeping the 2. EE, fine. Hearse, fine. Spellbomb, fine. Drown and Terminate out of the board were great. And then Giganta was good out of the board. Let us escape a Kroxa through a Blood Moon. So, you know, whatevs. But yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the Grixis video. Really sweet league. As always, have a link down below to the Twitch chat if you want to come, or the Twitch channel if you want to come check out a live stream. Link to the Twitter. It's the first place it goes live whenever a new stream is starting up, so you'll never miss anything. And link to the deck list if you want to check it out. So other than that, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. I'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.